Virtually everyone on the earth, regardless of religion and nationality, recognize that there is some form of battle raging in the world around us between the forces of good and evil. A colossal struggle between light and darkness, truth and error, oppression and freedom, right and wrong, and ultimately life and death. What is the story behind this glaring paradox? Many religions, including the Bible, teach that beyond the three-dimensional veil of our physical world we see, there's another very real spiritual world we cannot see. In this unseen realm ever about us, between the supreme righteous hero and the ultimate evil villain, the big question is, who are these primary players? And how, where, and when did this cosmic crisis begin? This is the greatest mystery of the ages and the most amazing true story that has ever been told. This crisis now involves every person on earth. Yes, every person. Human history has been riddled with scenes of war, and every person has experienced conflict. But to understand the origin of evil, we must travel back in time to the very first war of the universe, because this battle did not occur on Earth. Before our world even existed, there was a war in heaven. Even the words war in heaven sound like the ultimate paradox. It's almost unimaginable to us that there could be a battle and strife among God's perfect beings in paradise. What could have caused this celestial conflict? Thankfully, an ancient book called the Bible gives us enough details so that we can piece together the astonishing account. Although tragic, it's also an incredibly tender love story that reaches down through the ages, personally touching you and me and every individual on earth. Our story begins long ago in the very capital of the universe, in a place called heaven that was filled with angelic beings who delighted to do the will of God. Under the Creator's just and loving government, all of heaven enjoyed an existence of happiness and perfect bliss. The Supreme Prince of Heaven and Commander of the angels was the all-powerful and loving Son of God. Most know him by the name he took when he came to earth, Jesus. He was one in purpose and mind with God the Father. Heaven, under the compassionate rule of Father, Son, and Spirit, proved to be a place of wonder, peace, and joy. To carry out the commands of God, the Trinity was surrounded by a virtual ocean of countless ministering spirits called seraphim and cherubim, or more commonly, just known as angels. These powerful and intelligent creatures found their greatest joy in doing the bidding of the Almighty. But God created one extraordinary angel to serve as leader of the entire heavenly throng. The Bible tells us that his name was Lucifer, which means light bearer. This cherub was the greatest of God's created beings and held the position closest to God's throne and directly under Jesus in heavenly authority. Lucifer's job was to communicate the light and knowledge of God's will to all the other angels. Lucifer was God's most splendid created being. He was captivatingly handsome and endowed with astonishing powers of leadership and organization. Among the angels, he was greatly admired, respected, and loved as a friend. Yet, God foresaw the misery Lucifer was about to introduce into the kingdom of light.
Full of wisdom and perfect in beauty, every precious stone was your covering. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you.
As Lucifer began to ponder his own beauty and power, his heart gradually started to change. He allowed his focus to turn away from God, and he directed his love upon himself. How and why these seeds of rebellion germinated in his heart, we may never fully understand. But the prophet Isaiah provides this insight into Lucifer's thinking.
How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
Lucifer gradually began to covet the power of God, but not his character. As he thought about his own extraordinary abilities and beauty, the cancerous tentacles of pride and self-exaltation gripped his mind. This resentment and jealousy ultimately drove him to violate God's holy law and rebel against his government. We need to pause here and make something clear. From the beginning, God ordained the laws of physics to govern the material world we live in. Without these natural laws, the universe would be chaos. In the same way, God's moral law has always provided security and stability to the cosmos. Some believe that the Ten Commandments did not exist until the Lord delivered them to Moses on Mount Sinai. But Scripture teaches us that the principles of God's law have existed throughout eternity, for they're the very foundation of His heavenly kingdom of love.
All His commandments are sure. They stand fast forever and ever, and are done in truth and uprightness.
The Ten Commandments are a summary of God's character of love. The first 4 commandments describe who God is, His power, His territory, and authority. The last 6 describe what God is like, His honesty, His purity, His faithfulness. All of these things have always been true and will always be true. Now, for the first time in the history of eternity, Lucifer began violating these perfect principles. Lucifer knew if he was to ever share the power and status of God, he would need support. So he went to work. He began to deviously circulate among the other angels, planting seeds of doubt and discontent regarding God's leadership. At the same time, he would subtly highlight his own virtues. He insinuated that God was abusing His divine power, and His law was restricting the true freedom and happiness of His creatures. With his clever reasoning and unrivaled powers of influence, Lucifer managed to persuade a great number of the angels to join him in his mutiny. Perhaps you're wondering, how could so many intelligent angels be duped into following this deceiver? Well, keep in mind, up till this point, no angel had ever heard a lie. And at this early stage of the rebellion, the angels did not realize how obsessed Lucifer would become with acquiring the position of God. They did not know he would eventually stoop to torture and murder God's own Son on the cross in an attempt to seize his throne. Strangely, Lucifer thought he could conceal his true purpose from God.
Woe to those who seek deep to hide their counsel far from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. They say, "Who sees us, and who knows us?"
Don't think for a moment that Lucifer's rebellion surprised God or caught him unaware.